All right, folks, fasten your seatbelts because today we're taking a deep dive into a topic that's going to blow your mind.
Literally explosive, you could say.
Exactly, we're talking about volcanoes.
And not just any volcanoes.
Oh, no.
We're going to delve into the fascinating world of the Mount Edziza volcanic complex.
That's a mouthful.
Yeah, it is.
MEVC for short.
You got it.
Now, I'm Hari, your host for this fiery adventure, and joining me is the incredible Kimi, our geology expert who can make even rocks sound thrilling.
Hello, everyone.
So Kimi MEVC isn't exactly a name that rolls off the tongue like Vesuvius or Krakatoa.
That's true.
What makes this particular volcanic complex so special that we're dedicating an entire deep dive to it?
Well, for starters, it's one of North America's largest volcanic complexes, tucked away in the stunning landscapes of British Columbia, Canada, and it's been actively shaping the landscape for an incredible 7 million years.
Wow, 7 million years. That's longer than the entire existence of the human species.
It really puts things in perspective.
It does make you realize we're just tiny blips on the geological timescale.
Absolutely.
But hold on, you said actively shaping.
Mm-hmm.
Does that mean we need to pack our volcano survival kits for a trip to British Columbia?
Not exactly.
Right.
Active in geological terms has a slightly different meaning.
So it's not about to erupt.
While MEVC is currently dormant, not extinct, it is considered one of Canada's most potentially hazardous volcanic complexes simply because of its relatively recent activity.
Okay, that definitely adds an element of intrigue to our deep dive.
And the sheer variety of ways it has erupted in the past.
So before we get into the specifics of MEVC's explosive history,
Sure.
let's break down some volcano basics for our listeners.
Sounds good.
The sources mentioned something called bimodal volcanism.
Yes.
It sounds pretty technical.
It can be a bit jargony.
Can you explain what that means in a way that even I, as self-proclaimed geology enthusiast, can understand?
Imagine a cake with two distinct layers, one chocolate and one vanilla.
Okay, I'm with you.
Bimodal volcanism means that MEVC produces two main types of volcanic rock.
Ah, like the layers of the cake.
Precisely massic and felsic mafic rocks, like your dark chocolate layer, are rich in iron and magnesium, making them darker and denser.
Makes sense.
Felsic rocks, on the other hand, are like the vanilla layer, lighter in color and less dense as they're richer in silica and oxygen.
Interesting.
And just like a good cake, this combination creates a complex and fascinating geological story.
So it's not just one type of eruption, but a whole spectrum of possibilities.
Exactly.
This probably explains why MEVC has created such a diverse landscape over millions of years.
It's played a big part.
Speaking of variety, the sources list a whole buffet of rock types.
Oh, yes.
Basalt trachyte, even some intriguing names like commandite.
It's quite a mix.
Is this where the stew simmering on a stove analogy comes in?
You got it. The molten rock, or magma, originates deep within the Earth's mantle, and as it slowly rises and cools, different minerals crystallize at different temperatures.
Like how ingredients separate out in a simmering stew.
Exactly. This process, called fractional crystallization, gives rise to a variety of rock types, each with its own unique texture and composition.
So each eruption is like a new recipe creating a different layer in MEVC's geological cake.
A delicious analogy.
But here's something that puzzles me.
Okay.
The sources also mention these magmatic cycles, which suggest a kind of rhythm to MEVC's eruptions.
Yes, they do.
Can you shed some light on this pattern?
Think of MEVC's history not as a single eruption, but as a series of chapters, each marked by a distinct magmatic cycle. These cycles, 5 in total, span millions of years. And what's fascinating is that each cycle follows a pattern.
Oh, interesting.
It begins with eruptions of fluid, basalt-rich magma and ends with more explosive eruptions of viscous, silica-rich magma.
So it's like the volcano is building up to a grand finale before taking a breather and starting the cycle anew.
That's a great way to visualize it.
It's like the volcano has its own internal clock ticking away through these magmatic cycles.
It's quite remarkable.
But there's one more thing I'm curious about. The sources mention that each cycle tends to produce less volcanic material than the one before it.
Right.
Does this mean that MEVC is slowly but surely running out of steam?
It's more like the volcano is pacing itself, conserving its energy over time.
Interesting.
It might be producing less material overall, but that doesn't mean the eruptions are any less spectacular.
I see.
Like a master chef refining their recipes, creating more nuanced and intricate flavors with each new creation.
All right, Kimi, you've officially whetted my appetite for volcanic adventure.
Glad to hear it.
So let's embark on a journey through time and explore the first chapter of MEVC's story.
Let's go.
What kind of fiery spectacle unfolded during that first magmatic cycle millions of years ago?
Well, picture a time when woolly mammoths roamed the earth and vast ice sheets sculpted the landscape. That's the backdrop for the first magmatic cycle of MEVC, which took place between 7.5 and 6 million years ago.
Wow.
This cycle, the most voluminous of them all, is marked by three distinct formations:
Okay.
the Raspberry Little Isket and Armadillo.
Those are some pretty unique names for geological formations.
They are quite evocative.
What makes each one stand out in the grand scheme of MEVC's evolution? What should our listeners be picturing as we delve into this ancient volcanic past?
Well, let's start with the Raspberry Formation, the first on our geological tour. Hashtag TTS The Deep Dive, episode 2025-01-13, part 2 of 3. The Raspberry Formation paints a picture of a colossal shield volcano so vast that it covered an area larger than the entire state of Rhode Island.
That's enormous.
It's mind-boggling to imagine the amount of molten rock that must have poured out during that time, and you can still see its legacy today in the form of Raspberry Lake,
Oh, really?
which was formed when lava flows dammed a major river, dramatically altering the landscape.
It's incredible to think that a volcano can literally reshape the world around it, creating lakes and carving new paths for rivers. It makes you realize that we're not just studying rocks and eruptions, we're uncovering a story of creation and destruction on a massive scale. But what about the Little Isket Formation? What makes it stand out in this first explosive chapter of MEVC's history?
The Little Isket Formation takes us into a realm of underwater eruptions, a spectacle that must have been both awe-inspiring and terrifying.
So there were underwater volcanoes, too.
Imagine hot magma meeting the cold waters of the newly formed Raspberry Lake. The result would have been a series of violent steam explosions, sending plumes of ash and rock high into the air, a dramatic display of the raw power of nature.
Underwater volcanoes always capture the imagination. It's like a hidden world of fire and water colliding beneath the surface. But the sources also mention the Armadillo Formation, which sounds a bit more ominous. What kind of story does this formation tell?
The Armadillo Formation marks the grand finale of the first magmatic cycle, and it's a tale of dramatic collapse after all that volcanic buildup. The ground literally gave way, forming a massive caldera.
A caldera.
A giant crater that speaks to the immense forces at play within the Earth's crust. It's a reminder that even in the face of such colossal power, nature always seeks balance.
It's like the volcano is exhaling after a period of intense activity, leaving behind this giant scar on the landscape as a testament to its explosive past. But we've only just scratched the surface of MEVC's story. What awaits us in the second magmatic cycle? Does the volcano continue to ramp up the drama, or does it take a more subdued approach?
Well, the second magmatic cycle, spanning from 6 to 1 million years ago, is all about contrasts. We see periods of intense volcanic activity interspersed with quieter phases, a sort of ebb and flow that reflects the dynamic nature of MEVC. This cycle is marked by three distinct formations:
Three more.
the Nidospectrum and Pyramid, each offering a unique glimpse into the evolving personality of this volcanic giant.
Okay, so we're trading in our blockbuster movie analogy for a more nuanced, perhaps a multi-act play with its own rising action, climax, and resolution. Let's start with the Nido Formation. What kind of story does it set the stage for?
The Nido Formation introduces us to the concept of geological barriers shaping the course of volcanic activity. Imagine two separate lava fields, the Tension and Kanugu, flowing from different vents but separated by a natural barrier.
What kind of barrier?
The Armadillo Highlands, this division, created a sort of volcanic twinning, with two distinct areas experiencing the fiery wrath of MEVC simultaneously.
A volcanic twinning. That's an interesting way to put it. It's fascinating how even seemingly static features like mountain ranges can play a role in directing the flow of molten rock.
Yeah.
It's like a natural obstacle course for the lava to navigate, and the results are etched into the landscape for millions of years to come.
Yeah.
But what about the eroded peaks with names like Alpha, Beta, and Gamma? Are they remnants of this ancient volcanic trauma?
Precisely, those peaks, now just eroded shadows of their former selves, hint at the sheer scale of the Nido eruption. They were once part of a massed volcanic landscape, a testament to the power of erosion to reshape even the most imposing geological features over time. And then we have the Spectrum Formation, which takes us on a journey of gradual growth and dramatic collapse, a sort of volcanic soap opera playing out over millennia.
Okay, I'm intrigued. What kind of drama unfolded during the Spectrum Formation? Did it live up to its name, showcasing a spectrum of volcanic activity?
The Spectrum Formation is all about the rise and fall of the Spectrum Dome, a massive dome of rhyolite.
Rhyolite.
A type of volcanic rock known for its viscosity and tendency to create dramatic explosive eruptions. Picture this dome slowly growing over time, layer by layer, as molten rock oozes out from the vent, creating a towering structure that dominates the landscape.
I can almost picture this molten monster looming over the horizon, a beacon of the immense forces churning beneath the Earth's surface. But you said something about a collapse. Did this volcanic titan eventually succumb to its own weight?
Exactly. The spectrum dome, despite its slow and steady growth, was not immune to the forces of gravity at some point, likely due to a combination of internal pressure and the sheer mass of the overlying rock. The dome collapsed inward, creating a caldera, a giant crater that marked the end of the spectrum formation's reign.
It's a reminder that even in geology, what goes up must come down. And the results can be just as spectacular as the buildup itself. But we're not done with the second cycle yet. What about the pyramid formation? Does it continue the theme of dramatic collapses, or does it take MEVC in a new direction?
The pyramid formation marks a shift towards explosive activity, potentially even under glacial ice, adding a whole new layer of complexity and intrigue to MEVC's story.
Eruptions under ice. Wow.
Picture the pyramid, Sphinx dome, and Pharaoh dome all rising from the landscape, possibly even erupting beneath a thick blanket of ice, creating a hidden world of fire and ice interacting in a spectacular and potentially catastrophic dance.
Volcanoes erupting under ice. That sounds like a recipe for some truly epic glacial melt, and perhaps even some explosive interactions between molten rock and icy landscapes. But how can we be sure that these eruptions actually happened under ice millions of years ago? It's not like there were scientists around to document it.
That's where the rocks themselves become our time machines, preserving clues about the past. The pyramid formation contains a mixture of volcanic rocks and glacial deposits, a jumbled mess that tells a story of fire and ice colliding. It's like a geological fingerprint revealing the unique conditions under which these eruptions occurred.
It's amazing to think that we can piece together these ancient events just by looking at the rocks and understanding the language they speak. It's like being a geological detective, uncovering the secrets hidden within the Earth's crust. But we've only just scratched the surface of the second magmatic cycle, and I'm already feeling overwhelmed by the sheer scale and complexity of MEVC's history.
Well, hold on tight because we're about to enter the third magmatic cycle, a period marked by even more dramatic interactions between ice and fire. It's a chapter that takes us deeper into the Ice Age, revealing how MEVC's eruptions sculpted not just the landscape, but also the very history of glaciers in this region. Are you ready for another round of volcanic adventures?
Absolutely. Let's fire up the time machine and journey back to a world where glaciers and volcanoes battled for dominance, leaving behind a legacy that we can still unravel today. Hashtag TTS, the Deep Dive Episode 2025, ALIU 113, Part 3 of 3. Welcome back to our deep dive into the Mount Edziza volcanic complex. When we left off, we were picturing volcanoes erupting under these massive ice sheets. It's hard to even imagine the scale of something like that.
Yeah, it really is. And the third magmatic cycle, which unfolded between 1 and 0.8 million years ago, takes us deeper into this frozen world. It was a time when ice and fire clashed in a spectacular display of geological forces. The best part is they left behind clues that help us understand not just the history of MEVC,
But also the dynamics of ancient ice sheets.
exactly.
That's really fascinating that a volcano can act like a time capsule, preserving evidence of past climates and glacial activity.
You know, it really is. It's like MEVC is this giant puzzle that spans millions of years. We're not just studying rocks and eruptions here.
We're uncovering a story that's much bigger than that.
That's precisely what makes studying MEVC so fascinating. It's not just understanding volcanic processes, but how those processes interact with the surrounding environment. It's how they shape the landscape and leave behind a legacy that we can still see and decipher today.
Okay, so let's dive into the specifics of this third magmatic cycle.
Okay.
It was a period marked by three distinct formations: the Ice Peak Pillow Ridge and Edziza, each with its own unique story to tell.
And each one fascinating in its own right.
Those names themselves just make me think of icy landscapes and fiery eruptions.
It's quite a picture.
So let's start with the Ice Peak Formation. What kind of drama unfolded during this period? Did it live up to its name, with a world where ice and fire were battling it out for dominance?
Well, imagine the entire MEVC covered in a massive sheet of ice. It's a landscape that's just been transformed into this frozen realm. And that was the setting for the Ice Peak eruptive period.
Wow.
This was a time when volcanoes punched through the icy barrier, and it created this chaotic mix of molten rock, glacial meltwater, and these huge explosive steam blasts.
So what was left behind?
A jumble of volcanic and glacial deposits, a testament to the power of these two totally opposite forces reshaping the world around them. It's in this frozen battleground that Ice Peak itself started to rise layer by layer as different types of lava erupted and interacted with the surrounding ice.
So it's a story of construction and destruction.
Exactly, this delicate balance between fire and ice that shaped the very form of this peak.
I'm picturing in my mind this volcano slowly building itself up in this icy wasteland. Its fiery breath melting and reshaping the glaciers. It's like a scene straight out of a fantasy novel.
It's pretty epic.
But it was real. It's etched into the rocks themselves. You mentioned different types of lava. How did that affect the formation of Ice Peak?
So the lower slopes of Ice Peak are mainly composed of basalt. Basalt is a type of lava that's quite fluid.
Almost like honey.
Yeah, you could say that. It flows really easily, even over ice. And that creates those broad, gently sloping features. But as the eruptions kept happening, the composition of the magma changed. It became more viscous, stickier, and more prone to exploding.
Oh, what?
And this shift led to the formation of trachy basalt and trachyte. These lavas are thicker and tended to pile up near the vent, and that created those steeper, more imposing upper slopes of Ice Peak.
So as the volcano grew, it became more volatile and explosive?
Yeah, you could say its personality changed over time.
That's fascinating. So it's not just about the amount of lava, but its composition and how it interacts with the surrounding environment. Like different ingredients create different flavors and textures in a recipe.
I like that analogy.
What about Cusick Bluff and Ornstein Bluff? What role did they play in this?
So these bluffs are kind of like frozen waves of lava.
Okay.
They formed under unique conditions. Picture this thick, viscous trachyte lava being squeezed out from beneath the glacial ice. It couldn't flow freely, so it piled up into these massive lobes like toothpaste being squeezed from a tube.
I see.
And they're a reminder of the power of ice to shape even the most powerful eruptions.
They're like a frozen snapshot in time of this battle between fire and ice. But Ice Peak wasn't the only player in this third magmatic cycle. The sources also mention Camp Hill and Cache Hill. What's their story?
So they offer insights into this complex interplay between volcanoes, ice, and water.
Okay.
Camp Hill actually started out as a subglacial volcano. The eruptions interacted with the meltwater, and they created a ring of volcanic debris called a tuff ring.
A tuff ring, what's that?
It's just a ring-shaped deposit of volcanic material.
Gotcha.
And then as the ice thinned, the eruptions became more explosive, so a classic cone shape formed on top of this base.
It's like the volcano adapted to its changing environment.
Exactly. It shifted its strategy as the ice retreated.
What about Cache Hill?
So Cache Hill shows us how volcanic activity can change drainage patterns. It can create lakes and alter how rivers flow.
Interesting.
In this case, the basalt flows from Cache Hill, blocked a nearby river, and that formed a lava-dammed lake.
Wow, so it completely reshaped the landscape. The sources also mention something called the neck. What is that?
So the neck is a really cool example of how magma can solidify inside a volcano's conduit. It creates a sort of geological skeleton that gets exposed when the surrounding rock erodes away.
It's like looking inside the volcano.
Exactly. You can see the pathways where the molten rock flowed. And with the neck, this solidified magma is made up of two types of trachyte. A coarse-grained variety in the center surrounded by a finer-grained ring.
Like a bullseye.
Yeah, like a geological bullseye.
That's wild.
Yeah.
It's incredible how each feature has its own unique story. A piece of the larger puzzle that is the MEVC. What about the Pillar Ridge Formation? What's its story?
Well, the Pillar Ridge Formation takes us back to a time when the MEVC was still mostly covered in ice.
So still in the Ice Age.
Yes, and it shows us those unique features that form when lava erupts in those conditions. Imagine molten basalt being injected into the base of an ice sheet.
What happens?
It creates a crazy mix of pillow lava tuff and breccia.
I've heard of pillow lava.
It forms those rounded pillow-like shapes as the lava cools really quickly when it touches water or ice. It's like a classic sign of subglacial eruptions. And with Pillar Ridge, it gives us valuable clues about the extent of the Cordilleran ice sheet during the Middle Pleistocene.
So MEVC is helping us map out the history of these ancient ice sheets. It's like a hidden language written in the rocks themselves. But we can't forget about Mount Edziza. How did this iconic peak actually form?
So after all that subglacial activity, the ice sheet finally started to retreat. And what was left behind was a landscape that was ready for the formation of a new kind of volcano, a stratovolcano.
The classic cone-shaped volcano.
Right. It's a towering cone-shaped structure made up of layers of lava and ash. And that's how Mount Edziza was born.
Incredible.
It began to rise from the landscape. Its eruptions became more explosive as thick trachyte lava squeezed out, and it formed those steep-sided domes we see today. And volcanic blocks were flying through the air.
So even though the ice was melting, this was still a period of intense volcanic activity.
It was a time of major change shaping the landscape and creating that iconic peak that we see today.
It's amazing how much power a volcano has. But there's more to the story, right? The sources mention a collapse. What happened?
So Mount Edziza's journey wasn't just about building up, it was also about collapses that changed its shape.
Oh, wow.
At some point, the original summit, which would have been even taller than the peak we see today, collapsed inward, and that formed the massive crater we see now.
So the mountain collapsed in on itself.
It's a reminder that even the most imposing features are subject to gravity and the constant changes happening within the Earth.
It's a humbling thought that even mountains can crumble. But even after the collapse, Mount Edziza wasn't finished. The sources say there was still activity happening inside the crater.
That's right. Even though the summit had collapsed, there was still some volcanic activity. Lava domes like Nunuk Dome formed on the crater rim, and they spilled lava into the crater, creating lava lakes.
Volcanoes inside the volcano.
It's a testament to the volcano's power and resilience. And there were other vents active too on the flanks of Mount Edziza, adding to the complexity of this story. The MEVC was always finding new ways to reshape itself and the world around it.
It really is incredible.
That's one of the things that makes volcanoes so captivating. They're constantly evolving and changing, pushing the boundaries of our understanding of the Earth.
Well, Kimi, you've given us a truly amazing look into MEVC's explosive history. We've traveled through time and seen the forces that shaped this remarkable landscape. But unfortunately, that's all the time we have for today's deep dive.
It really has been a fascinating journey.
It has. We still have 2 more magmatic cycles to explore, each with its own unique story to tell.
But that will have to wait for another day.
So join us next time as we delve deeper into the MEVC's more recent past. We'll uncover the secrets of its eruptions and the clues they hold to understanding the future of this volcanic giant. Until then, keep exploring.
Happy adventuring, everyone.